They tell you to trust the good guys, to trust the badge, the vows, the light. But when I was bleeding on the cold concrete, my hero was too busy saving the world to save me. I thought I was going to die in the dark. But then, the devil stepped out of the shadows. And he did not just save my life. He burned the entire city to ash just to keep me warm. The needle pierced my skin, and I did not even flinch. I pulled the black surgical thread through the jagged cut on my left forearm, watching the thick drops of blood mix with the clear antiseptic on the cracked porcelain of the bathroom sink. My hands were shaking, a violent, uncontrollable tremor, but I could not afford to stop. Around me, the apartment I had called home for 3 years was entirely unrecognizable. The bookshelves were pulled down, their contents shredded. The mattress in the bedroom was slashed open, feathers drifting through the air like dirty snow. The glass from the front window was scattered across the hardwood floor like shattered ice, crunching under my boots every time I shifted my weight. It had been exactly 45 minutes since they left. 45 minutes of absolute, suffocating silence. My phone vibrated against the wet sink. The sudden buzzing made my heart leap into my throat. The screen lit up, illuminating the dark bathroom with his name, Mark. My fiancé. The man who had slid a diamond onto my finger 6 months ago and promised to protect me from the very monsters who had just torn my life apart. I answered, pressing the phone to my ear, my breath catching in my throat. Mark, I whispered, tasting the metallic tang of blood on my bottom lip. They were here. They broke into the apartment. There was a sigh on the other end of the line, not a gasp of horror. Not a frantic, desperate question about whether I was safe or if I was bleeding. Just a heavy, exhausted, irritated sigh. Evelyn, listen to me. His voice was crisp, professional, and completely detached. I am in the middle of a critical briefing. I cannot talk right now. Did you hear what I just said? I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white. The men from the South Side Syndicate, the ones you were supposed to be investigating. They kicked my door in. They cornered me in the kitchen. They said if I do not hand over the forensic reports from my brother's autopsy by midnight tomorrow, they are going to come back and kill me. I know you are scared, Evie, Mark said, using that calm, placating tone he always reserved for hysterical civilian witnesses. But you need to trust the legal process. File a report with the local precinct. My unit is closing in on a massive raid tonight. We are finally making a move on the Vitiello family. Lucian Vitiello is the biggest target in this entire city. I cannot pull my agents away for a domestic break-in. A domestic break-in. The words echoed in my mind, cold and incredibly hollow. 4 years. I had spent 4 years loving a man who wore a badge. 4 years of canceled dinners, lonely nights pacing the floor, and believing that his righteous crusade was worth the personal sacrifice. I had convinced myself that loving a hero meant sharing him with the world. But right now, standing in the ruins of my home with a bleeding arm and a literal target on my back, I realized the terrifying truth. He did not just share himself with the world. He chose the world over me. Every single time. His career, his sense of justice, his obsession with taking down the Mafia, it always came first. Mark, they held a knife to my throat. My voice cracked, the last fragile shred of my hope hanging by a microscopic thread. If you do not send someone right now, I will not survive the night. File the report, Evelyn. I will come by tomorrow morning when the raid is over. Keep the doors locked. I have to go. The line went dead. I stared at the glowing screen until it faded to black. Keep the doors locked. I looked out into the hallway. There was no door left to lock. It was hanging off its metal hinges, splintered wood resting on the ruined carpet. The bitter chill of the Chicago wind drifted through the broken windows, wrapping around my trembling shoulders. I was entirely alone. The police would not help me. Filing a report would only provoke the syndicate to act faster. My younger brother had owed them money, a massive gambling debt, and when they murdered him to make a point, the debt fell to me. As a forensic pathologist, I was the only one who had the hard evidence that could put their entire operation behind bars. They wanted those files destroyed, and they wanted me permanently silenced. I looked down at the silver engagement ring on my left hand. The small diamond felt suffocatingly heavy, suddenly feeling more like a chain around my neck than a promise of forever. I finished stitching my arm, tying off the tight knot with my teeth. I had to run. I threw whatever warm clothes I could find into a dark duffel bag, grabbing the encrypted flash drive from its hiding place inside the air conditioning vent. The drive contained everything: the autopsy photos, the toxicology reports, the undeniable proof of their crimes. I zipped the bag, my pulse hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I just needed to make it to the hospital. The downtown forensic lab had a secure, reinforced steel vault. If I could lock the drive in there, maybe I could negotiate. Maybe I could buy myself 24 hours to disappear. I stepped out of the apartment and down the back stairwell, slipping into the freezing night air. I pulled the high collar of my wool coat up against the biting wind. The street lamps overhead flickered, casting long, menacing shadows across the damp pavement. The city felt like a graveyard. Every parked car looked like a potential threat. Every single footstep echoing in the distant alleyway sounded like an executioner coming to finish the job. I walked fast, keeping my head down, my breath pluming in the freezing air. I thought I was being so incredibly smart. I thought I was slipping away into the safety of the dark. But what I did not know, what Mark in all his infinite, righteous wisdom had completely failed to realize, was that the shadows in this city did not belong to the good guys. They belonged to him. And the devil had been watching me the entire time. The underground parking structure of the downtown forensic lab was a tomb of gray concrete and flickering fluorescent lights. The air down here always smelled like damp earth and motor oil. My boots hit the pavement, the sound echoing off the low ceilings. I kept my hand buried deep inside my coat pocket, my fingers wrapped so tightly around the flash drive that the plastic edges dug into my palm. Just 50 more feet to the secure elevator. 50 feet to safety. I told myself to keep breathing. Just count the seconds. 1, 2, 3. But before I could reach 4, the screech of heavy tires tore through the suffocating silence. A black van swerved around a thick concrete pillar, its high beams turning the dark garage into a blinding white room. The brakes squealed, and before the vehicle even came to a complete stop, the side doors slid open. The metal groaned. 3 massive figures poured out into the pale light. They did not wear masks. They did not need to. Dead girls cannot identify faces. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I spun around to run back toward the exit ramp, my lungs burning as I gasped for the freezing air. But a 4th man was already standing there, stepping out from behind a parked sedan, completely blocking my path. He lunged forward. He grabbed me by the collar of my wool coat, lifting me off my feet and slamming my spine violently against the freezing concrete wall. The impact knocked the air completely out of my lungs. A blinding flash of pain radiated down my freshly stitched arm, the black thread ripping through my skin. The duffel bag slipped from my shoulder, hitting the ground with a heavy, hollow thud. One of the men kicked the bag open, pulling out my clothes and throwing them across the greasy floor. "Where is the drive, doctor?" The man pinning me hissed, his breath reeking of stale tobacco and cheap alcohol brushed against my face. "Your cop boyfriend is not here to hide you tonight. Hand over the autopsy files, or we are going to start removing pieces of you right here on the floor." I thrashed against his grip, trying to kick his shins, but he was too heavy. He was a mountain of muscle and cruelty. He grabbed my left hand, pinning it against the wall and twisting my wrist until a soft whimper escaped my lips. His dark eyes fell on the silver engagement ring shining faintly in the dim light. He let out a cruel, mocking laugh that bounced off the concrete walls. "A cop's whore," he sneered, spitting the words into my face. What a pathetic shame. You really thought he was coming to save you? He pulled a switchblade from his heavy jacket pocket. The metal clicked sharply, a terrifying, rhythmic sound in the quiet garage. He pressed the cold, flat edge of the blade against my cheek, trailing it slowly down to my jawline. I closed my eyes, my body trembling uncontrollably. A single tear slipped down my face, mixing with the fresh blood seeping from my torn arm. In that agonizing moment, everything became completely clear. Mark's empty promises meant absolutely nothing. The law meant absolutely nothing. The badge he worshipped could not stop a blade from cutting my throat. I was going to die in the dark, clutching a ring from a man who chose his career over my life. He raised the knife. The silver steel caught the light. I braced myself for the tearing of my skin. I waited for the end. But then, something impossible happened. The fluorescent lights overhead began to hum, a loud, electric buzzing that vibrated in my teeth. And then, one by one, the bulbs shattered. Pop, 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 pop. Glass rained down on the concrete floor like crystal tears. The entire underground garage was instantly plunged into absolute, impenetrable darkness. The man holding me froze. His blade stopped just millimeters from my skin. The air grew dead silent. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, rhythmic, unhurried footsteps echoing from the darkest corner of the underground lot. The distinct, sharp sound of expensive leather shoes hitting the concrete. Step, step, step. The men from the syndicate panicked. The heavy hands pinning me to the wall suddenly began to tremble. "Who is there?" The leader shouted into the black abyss, his voice suddenly stripped of all its previous arrogance. His grip on my throat loosened. The footsteps did not stop. They just kept coming, deliberate and heavy, echoing like the ticking of a doomsday clock. The air in the garage suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. The sickening scent of stale tobacco and sweat was instantly swallowed and replaced by something else entirely. The faint, intoxicating, dangerous smell of rich cedar wood, expensive cologne, and burning gunpowder. A silver lighter flicked open in the dark. The small, flickering orange flame illuminated the sharp, aristocratic jawline and the dead, obsidian eyes of a man standing just 10 feet away. The syndicate men stumbled backward, releasing me completely. They dropped their weapons, the metal clattering loudly against the ground as if it had suddenly turned to boiling water. They recognized him. Every single criminal, every single cop, and every single soul in this miserable city recognized him. He blew out a cloud of pale smoke, the ember of the cigarette glowing in the black void like the unblinking eye of a demon. "Let her go," a voice murmured in the dark. It was a deep, silken baritone, a voice that vibrated right through the concrete floor, crawled up my spine, and settled straight into the marrow of my bones. "Let her go," the voice whispered again, softer this time, dripping with a lethal, terrifying calmness. "Or I will paint this entire garage with your blood." The lighter clicked shut. The sharp, metallic sound echoed like a gunshot in the pitch-black garage. A heavy, suffocating silence immediately fell over the cold space. The 3 syndicate men were paralyzed, their breath coming in ragged, terrified gasps. The man who had held the switchblade to my throat dropped to his knees, his hands raised in the air, his weapon clattering across the oily concrete floor. I stayed pinned against the wall, sliding down slowly until my knees hit the freezing ground. My chest heaved, every single breath sending a sharp spike of agony through my torn arm. I could not see him clearly in the dark, but I could feel him. He had a gravitational pull, a terrifying, heavy aura that swallowed all the oxygen in the underground room. He did not come alone. From the deep shadows of the exit ramp, 5 more men materialized. They moved with complete, deadly silence, wearing tailored dark suits and carrying suppressed automatic weapons. They surrounded the syndicate thugs in a matter of seconds. The parking garage, which only moments ago had been my execution chamber, was now a slaughterhouse waiting for a single command. The slow, deliberate sound of his leather shoes resumed. Step, step, step. He walked past the kneeling men as if they were absolutely nothing, as if they were just garbage rotting on the damp pavement. He did not even look at them. His gaze, heavy and piercing, was locked entirely on me. As he stepped into the faint, flickering light of a distant street lamp bleeding through the garage entrance, I finally saw his face. Lucian Vitiello. He was a ghost, a myth whispered about in the forensic lab and feared in every police precinct in Chicago. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic features carved from marble and eyes as black as an ocean trench. He wore a charcoal wool overcoat over a perfectly tailored black suit. There was not a single trace of mercy in his expression. He stopped right in front of me. For a long, agonizing moment, he just looked at me. His eyes tracked the messy, bleeding stitches on my left arm, the dirt on my torn wool coat, and finally, the thin, red scratch on my cheek where the switchblade had kissed my skin. A terrifying, low rumble vibrated in his chest. It was not a sigh. It was the sound of a predator preparing to rip the world apart. "Who touched her?" he asked. His voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried over the empty concrete like rolling thunder. The syndicate men whimpered. "Mr. Vitiello, we did not know," the leader stammered, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated terror. "We swear to God, we did not know she belonged to you." The cop, Mark, he said she was unprotected. He said he pulled the surveillance away. We were just following orders from the south side. Lucian slowly turned his head to look at the kneeling man. The absolute lack of emotion on his face was more terrifying than any burning rage could ever be. "I did not ask for your excuses," Lucian said, his voice dropping into a smooth, deadly cadence. "I asked who touched her." The leader swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically. "It was me," he choked out, staring at the concrete. "But please, you have to understand. Break his hands," Lucian ordered, cutting him off with absolute finality. The screams that followed were something out of a nightmare. Two of Lucian's men stepped forward, grabbing the leader by his arms. They forced him face down onto the freezing floor. One of the guards placed his heavy combat boot directly over the man's right wrist. There was a sickening, loud crack, followed by an agonizing shriek that tore through the underground structure. Then the left wrist. Another crack, another scream. I squeezed my eyes shut, trembling violently, covering my ears with my shaking hands. The violence was brutal, overwhelming, and yet, deep down in the darkest, most broken part of my soul, I felt a twisted sense of justice. The men who had planned to carve me to pieces were now begging for death. The police and their laws had abandoned me, but the devil had answered my prayers. "Enough," Lucian murmured. The screaming instantly stopped, reduced to pathetic, wet sobbing. Lucian turned his attention back to me. The terrifying, cold monster vanished the second his eyes met mine. He unbuttoned his heavy charcoal overcoat, slipping it off his broad shoulders. He knelt down on one knee, right there in a puddle of dirty water and engine oil, not caring about his expensive clothes. He draped the heavy, warm wool over my trembling shoulders. The coat smelled of expensive cedar wood, tobacco, and the faint, metallic scent of gunpowder. It enveloped me, instantly chasing away the bitter chill of the damp concrete. I looked at him, my breathing shallow, completely paralyzed by the sheer proximity of the most dangerous man in the city. "Why?" I whispered, my voice trembling so hard the word barely came out. "Why are you doing this? You are Mark's enemy. You are the man he is hunting tonight." Lucian reached out. His hand was massive, his knuckles scarred, but his touch was impossibly gentle. He brushed a loose strand of hair away from my face, his thumb carefully tracing the edge of the shallow cut on my cheek. His skin was warm, a shocking contrast to the freezing garage. "The law of this city does not protect you, Evelyn," he murmured, his deep voice wrapping around me like a dark, heavy velvet blanket. "The man who gave you that cheap silver ring was willing to use you as bait. He was willing to let you bleed just to get to me." He grabbed my left hand. His thumb brushed over the silver engagement ring Mark had given me. Lucian's expression darkened, a flash of pure disgust crossing his features. He looked at the ring as if it was an open, rotting wound. He did not say a word about it, but the way his grip tightened around my fingers told me everything. He hated it. He hated the man who gave it to me. I closed my eyes, a fresh tear escaping down my cheek. The truth hurt far worse than the cut on my arm. Lucian's thumb wiped the tear away. He leaned in closer, his breath ghosting across my ear. His lips were just inches from mine. "Open your eyes, little bird," he whispered. I opened them, staring into his pitch-black gaze. I saw a possessive, consuming fire burning behind his calm facade. "The hero you chose was too busy trying to save the world," Lucian said softly, his thumb tracing my lower lip. "So let the villain who is going to destroy the world protect you." He stood up, effortlessly lifting me off the freezing floor and into his arms as if I weighed absolutely nothing. I was exhausted, bleeding, and entirely broken. My head fell against his chest, and for the first time in 4 years, listening to the steady, powerful rhythm of his heartbeat beneath his tailored suit, I actually felt safe. "Clean this up," Lucian ordered his men, his voice instantly cold again. "If any of them survive the night, I will hold you personally responsible." I did not struggle. I did not fight him. As he carried me toward a waiting black armored vehicle at the far end of the underground lot, the sounds of muffled cries and snapping bones faded into the background. I buried my face into the lapel of his overcoat, letting the darkness completely swallow me. I woke up to the smell of rain and burning wood. The mattress beneath me was impossibly soft, draped in heavy silk sheets that felt like warm water against my skin. I blinked against the dim, golden light of the bedroom. The space was massive, with vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a dark, turbulent lake. A fire crackled in a huge stone hearth across the room, casting long, dancing shadows on the mahogany walls. I pushed myself up, my muscles aching, and looked down at my left arm. The messy, frantic stitches I had sewn into my own skin back in my ruined bathroom were completely gone. In their place was a flawless, sterile white bandage wrapped with absolute surgical precision. My torn, bloody clothes had been replaced by a soft, black silk nightgown. I touched my face. The shallow cut on my cheek was sealed with a clear medical adhesive. Someone had put me back together while I slept. I slid out of the bed, my bare feet hitting the thick Persian rug. I walked slowly toward the heavy oak door and wrapped my fingers around the cold brass handle. I pulled. It did not budge. It was locked from the outside. My breath hitched. I backed away and moved toward the massive windows. The glass was cold, thick, and completely shatterproof. Outside, the sprawling estate was entirely isolated, surrounded by a 12-foot iron fence. Through the gray mist of the early morning, I could see men walking the perimeter, their dark coats hiding the sharp outlines of automatic rifles. I had escaped a concrete tomb, only to wake up inside a beautifully crafted, impenetrable gilded cage. The heavy lock on the door suddenly clicked. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. The door swung inward silently. Lucian Vitiello stepped into the room. He was no longer wearing his overcoat or the tailored suit jacket from the parking garage. He wore dark trousers and a crisp, black dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The exposed skin of his forearms was a landscape of faded, violent scars and intricate dark ink. He carried a small silver tray holding a steaming porcelain cup. He closed the door behind him. The click of the lock securing us inside echoed in the quiet room. "How long have I been asleep?" I asked, my voice slightly raspy, clinging to the wall as if it could somehow protect me from his overwhelming presence. 14 hours, he replied. His voice was a low, smooth vibration that seemed to wrap around the air itself. "You lost a significant amount of blood. My personal surgeon attended to your arm. There will not be a scar." He walked toward the small table near the fireplace and set the silver tray down. He picked up the porcelain cup and turned to face me, holding it out. "Drink," he murmured gently. "Chamomile tea. No sugar, a splash of almond milk. Exactly the way you order it every single morning at the small corner cafe near the forensic lab." I froze. The cold panic that had been simmering in my veins suddenly spiked. I stared at the steaming cup, then up into his obsidian eyes. "How do you know that?" I breathed, taking a small step backward. "That cafe is 5 miles away from my apartment. Mark does not even know how I take my tea." Lucian slowly lowered the cup. The absolute stillness of his body was terrifying. He moved toward me, his steps completely silent on the thick rug, stopping only when he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. He looked down at me, his gaze dark, heavy, and completely consuming. "Mark does not know anything about you, Evelyn," Lucian whispered, his voice dropping into a dark, intimate cadence. "He does not know that you pace the hallway when it storms. He does not know that you skip lunch on Tuesdays because the morgue smells too heavy. He does not know that you cry in your car after a grueling autopsy because you take the grief of strangers home with you. My breath caught in my throat. My hands began to tremble. And he certainly did not know, Lucian continued, stepping 1 inch closer, invading my space until I was trapped between him and the cold glass of the window, that for the past 8 months, my men have been watching every single step you take. My eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. You have been watching me? I saw you standing in the rain outside the federal courthouse last November, Lucian confessed, his voice turning incredibly soft, almost reverent. You were waiting for him. He never showed up. You stood there for 2 hours, shivering, holding a paper bag with his favorite dinner. You looked so heartbroken, so utterly abandoned. I knew right then that he did not deserve you. But you were loyal. You wore his ring, so I waited. He reached up, his large, scarred hand gently brushing a loose strand of auburn hair behind my ear. His touch was devastatingly tender, completely at odds with the violent monster the world knew him to be. I let him play his little games of justice, Lucian whispered, his thumb trailing down my jawline. I let him think he was winning the war against my family. I waited for the exact moment his ambition would finally blind him. I knew the South Side Syndicate would come for your brother's files. And I knew Mark would use you as bait. I waited for him to leave you to die in the dark, so I could be the one to pull you into the light. A tear slipped from my eye, the overwhelming weight of his obsession crashing over me. This was not a coincidence. This was not a random act of mercy in a dark garage. It was a meticulously calculated game of chess, and I was the prize he had been waiting nearly a year to claim. You are insane, I choked out, tears blurring my vision. You let them attack me just so you could play the savior? I would burn the world down before I let them take your life, he replied fiercely, the darkness in his eyes flaring into a terrifying, possessive fire. But you needed to see the truth, little bird. You needed to see that the righteous law your fiancé worships will never protect you. Lucian took my left hand in his. He looked down at the cheap silver engagement ring sitting on my ring finger. With a slow, deliberate movement, he slipped the ring off my hand. I did not stop him. I just watched as he walked over to the roaring fireplace and casually tossed the silver band directly into the burning flames. He built his career on your sacrifices, Lucian said, turning back to me, the golden light of the fire catching the lethal, beautiful contours of his face. I am going to build an empire on your smile. You are never going back to him. I woke up to the smell of rain and burning wood. The mattress beneath me was impossibly soft, draped in heavy silk sheets that felt like warm water against my skin. I blinked against the dim, golden light of the bedroom. The space was massive, with vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a dark, turbulent lake. A fire crackled in a huge stone hearth across the room, casting long, dancing shadows on the mahogany walls. I pushed myself up, my muscles aching, and looked down at my left arm. The messy, frantic stitches I had sewn into my own skin back in my ruined bathroom were completely gone. In their place was a flawless, sterile white bandage wrapped with absolute surgical precision. My torn, bloody clothes had been replaced by a soft, black silk nightgown. I touched my face. The shallow cut on my cheek was sealed with a clear medical adhesive. Someone had put me back together while I slept. I slid out of the bed, my bare feet hitting the thick Persian rug. I walked slowly toward the heavy oak door and wrapped my fingers around the cold brass handle. I pulled. It did not budge. It was locked from the outside. My breath hitched. I backed away and moved toward the massive windows. The glass was cold, thick, and completely shatterproof. Outside, the sprawling estate was entirely isolated, surrounded by a 12-foot iron fence. Through the gray mist of the early morning, I could see men walking the perimeter, their dark coats hiding the sharp outlines of automatic rifles. I had escaped a concrete tomb, only to wake up inside a beautifully crafted, impenetrable gilded cage. The heavy lock on the door suddenly clicked. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. The door swung inward silently. Lucian Vitiello stepped into the room. He was no longer wearing his overcoat or the tailored suit jacket from the parking garage. He wore dark trousers and a crisp, black dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The exposed skin of his forearms was a landscape of faded, violent scars and intricate dark ink. He carried a small silver tray holding a steaming porcelain cup. He closed the door behind him. The click of the lock securing us inside echoed in the quiet room. "How long have I been asleep?" I asked, my voice slightly raspy, clinging to the wall as if it could somehow protect me from his overwhelming presence. 14 hours, he replied. His voice was a low, smooth vibration that seemed to wrap around the air itself. "You lost a significant amount of blood. My personal surgeon attended to your arm. There will not be a scar." He walked toward the small table near the fireplace and set the silver tray down. He picked up the porcelain cup and turned to face me, holding it out. "Drink," he murmured gently. "Chamomile tea. No sugar, a splash of almond milk. Exactly the way you order it every single morning at the small corner cafe near the forensic lab." I froze. The cold panic that had been simmering in my veins suddenly spiked. I stared at the steaming cup, then up into his obsidian eyes. "How do you know that?" I breathed, taking a small step backward. "That cafe is 5 miles away from my apartment. Mark does not even know how I take my tea." Lucian slowly lowered the cup. The absolute stillness of his body was terrifying. He moved toward me, his steps completely silent on the thick rug, stopping only when he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. He looked down at me, his gaze dark, heavy, and completely consuming. "Mark does not know anything about you." "Evelyn," Lucian whispered, his voice dropping into a dark, intimate cadence. "He does not know that you pace the hallway when it storms. He does not know that you skip lunch on Tuesdays because the morgue smells too heavy. He does not know that you cry in your car after a grueling autopsy because you take the grief of strangers home with you." My breath caught in my throat. My hands began to tremble. "And he certainly did not know," Lucian continued, stepping 1 inch closer, invading my space until I was trapped between him and the cold glass of the window, "that for the past 8 months, my men have been watching every single step you take." My eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. "You have been watching me?" "I saw you standing in the rain outside the federal courthouse last November," Lucian confessed, his voice turning incredibly soft, almost reverent. "You were waiting for him. He never showed up. You stood there for 2 hours, shivering, holding a paper bag with his favorite dinner. You looked so heartbroken, so utterly abandoned. I knew right then that he did not deserve you. But you were loyal. You wore his ring. So I waited." He reached up, his large, scarred hand gently brushing a loose strand of auburn hair behind my ear. His touch was devastatingly tender, completely at odds with the violent monster the world knew him to be. "I let him play his little games of justice," Lucian whispered, his thumb trailing down my jawline. "I let him think he was winning the war against my family. I waited for the exact moment his ambition would finally blind him. I knew the South Side Syndicate would come for your brother's files. And I knew Mark would use you as bait. I waited for him to leave you to die in the dark, so I could be the one to pull you into the light." A tear slipped from my eye, the overwhelming weight of his obsession crashing over me. This was not a coincidence. This was not a random act of mercy in a dark garage. It was a meticulously calculated game of chess, and I was the prize he had been waiting nearly a year to claim. "You are insane," I choked out, tears blurring my vision. "You let them attack me just so you could play the savior?" "I would burn the world down before I let them take your life," he replied fiercely, the darkness in his eyes flaring into a terrifying, possessive fire. "But you needed to see the truth, little bird. You needed to see that the righteous law your fiancé worships will never protect you." Lucian took my left hand in his. He looked down at the cheap silver engagement ring sitting on my ring finger. With a slow, deliberate movement, he slipped the ring off my hand. I did not stop him. I just watched as he walked over to the roaring fireplace and casually tossed the silver band directly into the burning flames. "He built his career on your sacrifices," Lucian said, turning back to me, the golden light of the fire catching the lethal, beautiful contours of his face. I am going to build an empire on your smile. You are never going back to him. The heavy rain continued to assault the floor-to-ceiling windows of the estate, blurring the distant lights of the Chicago skyline into streaks of pale gold and crimson. The massive bedroom was quiet, save for the crackle of the fireplace and the low, synthetic hum of the flat-screen television mounted on the far wall. I sat on the edge of the silk bed, my knees pulled to my chest, wearing one of Lucian's oversized cashmere sweaters. The scent of his cedar and smoke cologne enveloped me, a constant, heavy reminder of exactly where I was. On the television screen, the local news station was broadcasting a live press conference from the Federal Bureau of Investigation headquarters. The banner across the bottom read, "Southside Syndicate Leadership Dismantled." And standing at the wooden podium, looking devastatingly polished in his navy blue suit, was Mark. The camera zoomed in on his face. The face I had kissed thousands of times. The face I had trusted with my entire life. He leaned into the microphone, his expression painted with a flawless mask of righteous determination. Last night, we executed a highly coordinated operation that successfully neutralized the most dangerous elements of the Southside Syndicate, Mark announced, his voice carrying that familiar, authoritative weight. This was a victory for the people of Chicago. We leveraged a critical window of opportunity, and thanks to the strategic deployment of our tactical units, we have made our streets significantly safer today. The reporter in the front row raised her hand. "Agent? Were there any civilian casualties during this sting operation?" Mark did not even blink. The situation was fully contained. He lied seamlessly. All civilian assets were monitored and protected at all times. The greater good was served without tragic consequence. A sickening wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. Protected. He stood there on national television, basking in the flash of the cameras, acting as if I had not been 30 seconds away from having my throat cut on a freezing concrete floor. A soft click sounded behind me. Lucian stepped out of the shadows of the doorway. He moved like a phantom, holding a thick manila folder and a small, black, digital audio recorder. He did not look at the television. He looked only at me. He walked to the glass coffee table at the foot of the bed and set the items down. His movements were slow, deliberate, and unbearably heavy. "I told you he built his career on your sacrifices," Lucian murmured, the deep, rumbling vibration of his voice cutting right through the noise of the broadcast. "But you are a woman of science, Evelyn. You deal in evidence. So, I brought you the evidence." I stared at the black recorder. My heart began to pound a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. "What is that?" I whispered. "A wiretap from his office," Lucian replied smoothly. "Recorded exactly 4 hours before you were attacked in the parking garage." Lucian reached out and pressed the small play button. The audio was slightly grainy, but the voices were unmistakably clear. It was Mark, speaking to his commanding officer. "We pull the surveillance detail off Evelyn's apartment right now," Mark's recorded voice echoed in the quiet bedroom. "They want the forensic drive. The moment they realize she is unguarded, they will track her to the lab garage. We wait until they corner her, and then we move in with the tactical team. We catch them red-handed with a deadly weapon. It is an airtight conviction." There was a pause on the tape. Then, the older voice of his captain spoke. "Is she aware of the risk, Mark? She is your fiancé. If we are late by even 1 minute, they will kill her." Another agonizing pause. My lungs stopped working. I waited for the man I loved to say he changed his mind. I waited for him to protect me. "She is strong," Mark's voice finally replied, cold and entirely devoid of emotion. "It is a necessary tactical risk. The greater good has to come first. She would understand." Lucian reached down and turned the recorder off. The silence that followed was deafening. The air in the room suddenly felt entirely devoid of oxygen. The illusion did not just crack, it violently shattered into a million irreparable pieces. It was not negligence. It was not a mistake. It was premeditated. The man I had planned to marry, the hero who swore an oath to protect the innocent, had explicitly offered me up as a lamb to the slaughter. A visceral, agonizing sob ripped its way out of my throat. My hands flew to my face, my fingers digging into my hair as my entire body shook with the force of the betrayal. 4 years. 4 years of my life given to a ghost. A phantom who cared more about the brass shield on his chest than the beating heart inside mine. I cried until my lungs burned. I cried for the naive girl who had waited in the rain for him. I cried for the life I thought I was going to have. I felt the mattress dip behind me. The heavy, overwhelming heat of Lucian's body pressed against my back. He did not say everything would be all right. He did not offer pathetic, empty platitudes. He simply wrapped his massive, muscular arms around my waist, pulling me flush against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling the scent of my skin as if it was the only air he needed to breathe. "Cry, little bird," Lucian whispered, his lips brushing against my collarbone. "Let the weak girl die tonight. Weep for the illusion. Shed every single tear you have left for him right now." I leaned back into his solid chest, my hands dropping down to grip his thick forearms. His grip tightened, anchoring me to the earth, holding me together when I felt like I was unraveling into absolute nothingness. The darkness inside him was no longer terrifying. It felt like a shield. And when the sun comes up, Lucian's voice dropped to a dark, lethal hum, a promise of absolute destruction vibrating directly against my skin. "I am going to bring you his head." I closed my eyes. The tears finally stopped falling. The girl who had believed in the light was gone, completely consumed by the flames of her own betrayal. I turned my face slightly, pressing my cheek against his jaw, surrendering completely to the monster who held me. "Burn it all down," I whispered into the dark. The storm outside was nothing compared to the violent symphony that erupted just after midnight. The heavy, reinforced oak doors of the bedroom shuddered as a low, mechanical siren began to wail through the massive estate. The warm, golden light of the fireplace was instantly swallowed by the harsh, pulsing red glow of the emergency lockdown system. Lucian stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, completely unbothered by the chaos. Outside, the deafening roar of helicopter rotors tore through the freezing rain. Blinding white searchlights swept across the manicured lawns, illuminating dozens of tactical vehicles smashing through the wrought iron front gates. "They are here," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the mechanical screaming of the alarms. Lucian turned away from the window. His obsidian eyes were calm, but there was a lethal, predatory curve to his mouth. He walked toward a hidden safe behind a mahogany bookshelf, pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner, and pulled out a sleek, matte black handgun. He walked back to me, taking my right hand and pressing the cold metal into my palm. His massive hands guided my fingers around the grip. "It is heavy," I breathed, my heart slamming violently against my ribs. "Justice usually is, little bird," he murmured, his breath ghosting across my forehead. He stepped back, rolling up the sleeves of his black shirt, the violent tapestry of his tattoos fully exposed under the flashing red lights. "Stay behind me. When the door opens, do exactly what your heart tells you to do." The estate was a fortress, but Mark had brought an army. The sounds of shattering glass and heavy gunfire echoed from the ground floor, a chaotic, muffled war zone directly beneath our feet. Lucian's men were holding the line, funneling the tactical strike team exactly where Lucian wanted them to go. Up the grand marble staircase, straight toward the master suite. 3 agonizing minutes passed. Then, the heavy oak double doors of the bedroom were violently kicked open. "Drop the weapon, Vitiello. Get your hands in the air right now." Mark stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 heavily armored federal agents. His tactical rifle was raised, the red laser sight aimed directly at Lucian's chest. Mark looked exactly like the hero they painted him to be on the evening news. His jaw was set, his posture rigid with righteous authority. He looked past Lucian's broad shoulders, his eyes frantically searching the shadows until they landed on me. "Evelyn," Mark called out, his voice thick with a sickeningly fake layer of desperation and relief. "Thank God. Step away from him, Evie. It is over. You are safe now." I stood completely frozen behind Lucian. My fingers tightened around the cold grip of the handgun hidden in the folds of the oversized cashmere sweater. "She is not going anywhere with you, Agent," Lucian said, his deep baritone cutting through the tension like a razor blade. He did not raise his hands. He did not even flinch at the 4 rifles pointed at his head. He just stood there, an immovable wall of absolute darkness between me and the man who tried to kill me. Mark's face twisted with arrogant fury. "You are done, Lucian. The building is surrounded. Your men are surrendering. Step away from my fiancé, or I swear to God I will put a bullet right between your eyes." He looked back at me, softening his voice, playing his pathetic, manipulative role to absolute perfection. "Evie, please. I know you are terrified. I know what he has done to you. Just run to me. I have got you." The sheer audacity of his lie made the blood freeze in my veins. He was going to use this. He was going to use my rescue to cement his legacy, completely burying the fact that he was the one who threw me to the wolves. I took a deep breath. The terrified, trembling girl who had stitched her own arm in a ruined bathroom was dead. I stepped out from behind Lucian's broad back. Mark lowered his rifle just a fraction of an inch, a victorious, relieved smile beginning to form on his lips. "Come here, baby," he whispered. I raised my right hand. Mark's smile instantly vanished. The 4 tactical agents behind him tensed, unsure of what they were seeing. The red laser sights danced across the room, but my hand was perfectly steady. I aimed the black handgun directly at Mark's chest. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" Mark asked, his voice cracking, the polished facade of the hero finally beginning to slip. "Put the gun down. He is manipulating you." "The greater good, Mark," I said. My voice did not shake. It was eerily calm, echoing in the ruined room. "That is what you told your captain, right? A necessary tactical risk." All the color drained from Mark's face. His eyes widened in absolute, paralyzing horror. He realized, in that exact second, that I knew everything. "Evie, listen to me," he stammered, taking a desperate step forward. "You do not understand the pressure. I had to make a call to take down the syndicate. I did it to protect thousands of innocent people. I did it for us." "You did it for yourself," I interrupted, my finger resting lightly on the trigger. "Your badge, your career, your pathetic need to be the savior of Chicago. You left me to be carved into pieces on a concrete floor because my life was an acceptable loss to you." Mark swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he held his rifle. "Evelyn, please. You are not a killer. You save lives. Do not throw your life away for a monster." I looked at Lucian. He was watching me, his obsidian eyes burning with a dark, terrifying pride. He had given me the weapon. He had given me the choice. He did not force me into this war. He simply handed me the crown. "He might be a monster," I whispered, turning my cold gaze back to the man I used to love. "But when the world broke me, the monster picked up the pieces. And he is perfectly willing to burn your righteous world to the ground if anyone ever tries to hurt me again." "Evelyn, do not," Mark screamed. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening. The recoil sent a shockwave up my arm, but I did not drop the weapon. Mark was thrown backward against the doorframe, a scream of pure agony ripping from his throat as his tactical rifle clattered to the floor. I had not aimed for his heart. I aimed directly for his right shoulder, perfectly shattering the joint, ensuring he would never hold a weapon or wear a federal badge, ever again. The agents behind him instantly raised their weapons, shouting confused orders, but before a single one of them could fire, Lucian moved. He was a blur of lethal, calculated violence, stepping completely in front of me, drawing his own weapon in a fraction of a second. "Stand down," Lucian roared, a demonic, terrifying command that literally shook the walls. "Look at your golden boy. Look at him bleed. The war is over." Mark writhed on the floor, clutching his ruined shoulder, blood pooling on the expensive rug. The hero of Chicago was broken, sobbing like a child, his entire legacy destroyed by the woman he thought he could effortlessly sacrifice. I lowered the gun, the smell of burnt gunpowder filling my lungs. I did not feel any regret. I did not feel any guilt. As Lucian wrapped his arm fiercely around my waist, pulling my back against his chest while his men flooded the hallway to disarm the remaining agents, I realized something terrifyingly beautiful. The light had never saved me. The dark was exactly where I belonged. The flashing red lights finally stopped. The remaining federal agents dragged Mark away, not as a decorated hero, but as a disgraced, bleeding liability. His pathetic screams echoed down the grand marble staircase until the heavy doors slammed shut. The sirens slowly faded into the distance. The sprawling estate was quiet once again, save for the sound of the freezing rain hitting the shattered glass scattered across the bedroom floor. Lucian stood amidst the wreckage. He engaged the safety on his weapon and tossed it onto a ruined velvet armchair. He walked slowly toward me, his heavy boots crunching over the broken glass. He did not spare a single glance at the absolute destruction of his beautiful home. He only looked at me. He stopped right in front of me and slowly dropped to one knee. The absolute silence in the room was deafening. The most feared man in Chicago, the devil who ruled the Midwest underworld with an iron fist, was kneeling on a ruined floor for a broken forensic pathologist. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. He flipped it open. Inside was a ring. It was not a thin, cheap silver band meant to symbolize an empty promise. It was a massive, flawless black diamond, set in heavy, dark platinum. It looked like a piece of the night sky, cut and polished into a weapon. He took my left hand. His thumb gently brushed over the faint red scratch on my finger where Mark's ring used to be. "I am not a good man, Evelyn," Lucian whispered, his deep, rumbling voice vibrating against my skin, wrapping around my soul like a warm, heavy blanket. "I will never be a good man. I am violence. I am the shadows. But I swear on my miserable life, the world will burn to ash before anyone ever makes you bleed again." He slid the black diamond onto my finger. It fit perfectly. It was heavy, cold, and terrifyingly beautiful. It was not just an engagement ring. It was a crown. I looked down at him. I did not see a monster anymore. I saw the only truth I had ever known. I reached out, running my trembling fingers through his dark hair, pulling him up until he was standing flush against me. I wrapped my arms around his neck and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was desperate, bruising, and tasted like burnt gunpowder, rain, and absolute devotion. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me away from the broken glass and toward the edge of the floor-to-ceiling window. The cold wind whipped through the shattered panes, blowing my auburn hair across his chest. Down below, the city of Chicago was a chaotic sea of flashing police lights and wailing sirens. The righteous world was tearing itself apart, trying to find a monster, completely unaware that the monster had already won. Mark's career was over. The syndicate was dead, and Lucian Vitiello held the entire city in the palm of his hand. I leaned my head against Lucian's chest, listening to the steady, powerful rhythm of his heartbeat. I looked at the black diamond glittering on my hand in the dim light. I smiled, letting the last piece of my old life blow away into the freezing wind. I would rather be the reigning queen of a beautiful hell than a forgotten pawn in a fragile heaven. What about you? If you were standing in the dark, bleeding on the cold concrete, who would you choose? The hero who sacrifices you for the greater good, or the villain who sacrifices the entire world just to wipe a single tear from your face? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved this dark romance story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more immersive audiobooks. Until next time, embrace the shadows.